To moderate this session, we have Ms. Vanessa Puig-Williams with the Environmental Defense Fund. Vanessa leads efforts in sustainable groundwater management as director of the Texas Water Program. She's a native Texan and has over a decade of experience working alongside conservation and landowner groups to protect critical groundwater resources. Prior to joining EDF, Vanessa served as the Executive Director and General Counsel of the Trinity Edwards Spring Protection Association. And Vanessa is really one of the key players in getting this conference off. So please welcome Vanessa to the stage, as well as the panelists, and she will introduce them shortly. So thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Louis, and thank you so much to Sul Ross University for creating the opportunity to have this conversation today, and for all of y'all for coming out here. This is my favorite part of Texas, so I'm excited to be here as well. And as Louis said, I work for Environmental Defense Fund, and I lead our water program here. And one of the main things that we work on is groundwater. We are really advocating to ensure that groundwater is managed in a proactive way to ensure that it's available in the future. We've heard a lot today about how important groundwater is to the state, but particularly to West Texas. So what we're going to do today is talk about how it's managed. And so joining me on the stage today are four representatives from groundwater conservation districts. They are from the groundwater conservation districts that I think Chairman King would agree he's glad the legislature created. And so they're going to share with y'all just their perspectives on what it's like managing groundwater out in West Texas, and specifically in their local groundwater districts, how they work with landowners and communities, the role of science and how they do their job, and then some of the challenges that they're facing, which we've heard a little bit of today. So join me in welcoming our panelists. Thank you. We have Janet Adams from the Jeff Davis Underground Water Conservation District, Joan Johnson, who's with the Brewster County Groundwater Conservation District, Greg Perrin from the Reeves County Underground Water Conservation District, and finally Trey Gerfers from the Presidio County Underground Water Conservation District. It's a mouthful. So just a few key points that I wanted to make sure I stressed so that we were all on the same page. And we've kind of talked a little bit about this this morning so far, but a groundwater conservation district is a local governmental entity that's created by the state that essentially has the authority to manage groundwater. And our state has said that local management of groundwater is the preferred way of managing groundwater. And I think that's important because, as we'll hear today, groundwater is very unique. It's unique to how it's used locally. It's also hydrogeologically very unique to the setting. So it's supportive. We're supportive and think that local management is very important and the right way to do things. So local groundwater conservation districts have the authority to manage the production of groundwater and to set spacing limits for wells to ensure that groundwater is conserved. And then finally, just one last point is that groundwater districts in Texas have the difficult and unenviable task of protecting property rights and balancing both the conservation and development of groundwater. And in doing so, they have to use the best available science. So that is a challenge. It's very difficult, and these people here are kind of walking that tightrope every day. So I want to start with letting each of you, for just a minute or two, talk about your district and what makes it unique and what are some of the things that you are working on right now. Janet, why don't we start with you? We'll go down the line. It should just be on.
Is it on? Okay. Jeff Davis County is of the fourth oldest groundwater district in this part. We were formed in 1993. It covers all of Jeff Davis County, which is 2,258 square miles. At one time, we had a portion of Brewster County and a portion of Presidio County and a portion of Middle Pecos. But once those districts were formed, we gave that land to those counties. So we're just as county-wide now.
here so they can hear. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Our enabling legislation, we had modified and changed in 17. Our board is now, term is from starts on March 1st. We are no longer under the groundwater rule of 36-121, which Trey will probably talk a lot about. And it let us increase our rates. We're strictly rates. We are not taxing. We will never be taxing. So our production rates are what finances the district.
What kind of main uses do you have for groundwater in your district?
What?
What's the main groundwater use that you're seeing in your district?
Mainly our schools and our parks are the big users.
Okay. Joan, tell us about Brewster County.
Hello, there it is. Brewster County, as you all know, is the largest geographical county in Texas with 6,192 square miles, and we've got 5 aquifers that are mentioned, and so what size does not fit all for Brewster County at all. If y'all looked at the screen that was up earlier about Texas Water Development Board's map of registered wells, probably Brewster County has at least 50% more than that are not registered, so not on that map. Our district was established in 2001, so we're a little bit newer to this. We are not a taxing district, and I don't anticipate us becoming one in Brewster County, so that we're dependent on our fees and subsidies from the county to maintain what we do.
And Joan, can you just share, in case people don't understand the difference between fees and taxes?
Oh, yes. A district that is ad valorem tax based, and you live in that district, you're paying some amount of money on your tax bill that's going to fund your underground conservation district. If that doesn't exist, then the fees are what we charge for registering your well, for production fee permits, for export fees, for annual production fees, for applying for the various kinds of permits. So it's fees that the owner of the well or the user of the well will be paying to the district to get a well and use the water. So they're totally separate ways of financing water district, and it's probably came from the enabling legislation way back in the beginning of your district. So,
And the enabling legislation is the legislation that our state legislature passes, which gives more specific powers and authority to each groundwater district. So that's why across the state, districts are very different and unique.
I guess our water usage that you mentioned, most of the water that's pumped is for the Water Supply Corps in Brewster County, of which there's several. The city of Alpine is not under our jurisdiction because of the legislation way back in the beginning, but they are probably the #1 user of water in Brewster County, but we do not have authority over them as the groundwater district. And our challenges including registering more wells that are old, as well as figuring out how do we get water to these subdivisions and developments that do not have access to a municipal water court. So that's the new challenge that we're trying to deal with.
Greg?
Okay, I'm in Reeves County. Is this on? We are the youngest group out here. Well, we've just been in existence since 2013, when it went through the legislature. 2017, they had the countywide vote on it, and opened the office in 18. And I lived out here in the 70s and 80s, knew the area and a lot of the older ranch landowners and everything. I was in the Central Texas area, but I escaped and came back 7 years ago. And so, been here ever since. We're a 7-member board. We are tax-based. We don't have any fees, and we're, unfortunately or fortunately, we're in the middle of the Delaware Basin, which, as we know, is the center of the universe right now out here. And we're, again, fortunate enough to have good funding. We're dropping our taxes every year as low as we can, and then lo and behold, more oil comes in and it just gets higher and higher. But the biggest use right now is the oil and gas industry. There used to be a lot of farming, cultivation in between Balmorhea and Pecos in the years past, 250,000 acres of cotton. Now in cultivation is less than 20,000 acres total in our county. So anyway, we've got a lot of things to overcome. We're again new. We're still in the process of registering wells. We've got about 3,300 in our database. 900 plus have not been registered yet. Those are numbers we got from and figures we got from the Texas Water Development Board. We figure there's about 1,000 more wells, and we're still working on that, and we're hoping to, within a year to get that done. 5 o'clock today, my last 3 original board members are off the board today. They've term limited out, so I've got to get back to Pecos by 5 o'clock today for a board meeting. But anyway, that's where we are now.
Busy. So if you could explain really quick what you mean when you say registering wells.
What, if you have a well, have a hole in the ground anywhere, we want to register to come in. It costs nothing, and it's chances are it was in existence before when our rules became effective in September of 19. So it'll be historic use, and we will issue you the equivalent of what your well or wells accumulated, an aggregate on your property will produce, up to a maximum of 6 acre-feet per acre.
Why is it important to register wells?
So we tell everyone, so we know where they are, so we have spacing requirements, so we can monitor, we can keep someone from drilling a well right next to yours, a deep well that's going to produce 2,500 gallons a minute and drain yours dry, that kind of deal. And also to monitor the quantity and the quality and all, and try to keep, make sure there's not any contamination, or try to eliminate it.
One last question for you, Greg. You also have a pretty important spring system in your district. Can you maybe talk a little bit about St. Solomon Springs?
Yes, there's a little swimming pool down in the southwest corner, but y'all have heard story about it, but again, it's in the southwest corner. The water comes out in our county, comes through her county by way of Culberson County, most of the water. So you heard all of that, 3 different counties, 3 different GCDs, 2 different GMAs, it's different. But yeah, we fund research, different groups, ongoing, and have ever since I've been there. And we will continue it and increase it to monitor and find out more spots where the water comes from, what's in it, how it's, and try to sustain it as long as we can. We want to keep it for forever, but especially in my lifetime.
I know you like to swim there a lot, so. All right, so let's move on to Trey with Presidio County. I think, Greg said they've got a good amount of funding, but I know you guys have struggled with that in Presidio.
Yes, so Presidio County was our groundwater district. We're county seat Marfa, and the district was created by it was formed by the landowners, really sort of in response to some land that was purchased by El Paso Water back in the early 90s. So the landowners really came together and wanted this groundwater district because it's really the only way under state law that you can have local control. It's limited, but it's really the only thing that you can have for local control. So it was formed by the voters in 1999, or approved by the voters in 1999. But you know, true to form, Presidio County is always a little bit weird. And our enabling legislation that created us included language that gave us the ability to tax, to have an ad valorem tax, a property tax, like a school district, like a hospital district, groundwater district tax. But there was no language in the ballot initiative, so the voters, when they voted to create it, they didn't give us the authority to tax. So we've just been kind of fake fee basing it, and going every budget cycle hat in hand to the county commissioners. And so this past May, we got a proposition on the ballot, Proposition 1, asking the voters for a new tax. Imagine that. And it passed, 85% of the vote, with record turnout for a non-federal, non-November election. So we are very, very focused on serving as a resource, making sure that we spend that money very judiciously. We're used to being on a shoestring, so I imagine we'll stay on a shoestring. And our main users are our municipalities, Marfa and Presidio, and I think that answers the question.
Great. Well, I wasn't sure kind of how many different kinds of people would be here, how many people know a lot about groundwater districts or who know nothing. So I thought it could be helpful just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. If each of you just kind of shared with the audience in sort of layman's terms, like what it is that you do. What does a groundwater district do? What do you see your role being? And why don't we start with you, Trey?
Well, I see our role really as being a resource for landowners. Ultimately, the groundwater district is there to balance those beneficial uses and protect your private property in groundwater. Some landowners may not view it that way, but that's how we view our role, and that's really going to be based on rulemaking, permitting, and monitoring. And so we're really trying to expand our monitoring system, really just to understand the health of the aquifers. But really, I mean, our main role is to be a resource for our landowners.
Craig, with oil and gas being sort of the predominant use, how would you describe your role?
Well, again, not to be stealing any of Trey's ideas, but the same thing, rulemaking, monitoring and all, but also we have a lot of the oil industry, going back to that, dealing with them. I deal with a lot of any and all that come in there, especially with produced water, to try to learn more and come up with ways that maybe in the future we can bring cleaned up produced water into the area and help out. But just the rulemaking and showing people, the landowners, the well owners, not what we, where they stand, what their wells look in their area, and all the levels of the water, what's happening and all.
So like understanding kind of the aquifer system. Joan?
I think they've covered in general what is going on, and Brewster's no different. We can't, our goal is to protect the water and provide the water. So there's both sides of the coin, always. And our challenges are unregistered wells. We don't know where they are. We can't protect them if we don't know they exist. And then developing the science needed for future use of water and future permits that will come through the pipe sooner or later.
Janet, excuse me for asking, but how long have you been with the Jeff Davis Underground? I know you have a wealth of knowledge,
Since it was formed.
since it was formed. Okay.
Janet's an institution.
Yes.
In 93, and before that, I had with the Fort Davis Water Supply, 56 years. So all the water in Jeff Davis County and Fort Davis go through me, except my friend in Valentine. Alabama runs his own system.
Okay.
We're a little different. We have 6 aquifers. And our main goal is to protect the water for now and in the future. We have 3 entities that transport water out of our district. The city of Alpine gets water from Jeff Davis, Vera Valley, and the city of Valmarais. So we're also here to protect their water even though they're not in our district. And that is our main goal, is to protect the water for the future.
Well, all of y'all have mentioned that that groundwater plays an important role in providing municipal water sources within your districts. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the relationship that you have with those communities, and then also the relationship that you have with landowners, which Trey mentioned, sometimes can be a little bit contentious because groundwater is privately owned in Texas. So Trey, what are your thoughts on how your district navigates those relationships?
Well, I think what I mainly like to talk about is what we're working on with our cities and our main communities. We have Marfa and Presidio are currently operating under an exemption in Chapter 36, which is the Texas Water Code, for everybody that doesn't know that. There's an exemption in there called 36.121. I think Janet might have already alluded to that. And that essentially allows municipalities under a certain population number, roughly population of Midland, to pump and sell as much water as they want. And so, this sounds great from from certain perspectives where, the city is able to, water's often a big revenue source for cities. And so, yeah, why not be able to pump and sell as much as you want? And so, in going to the cities now and talking to them about perhaps giving up this exemption, I'm trying to tie up, again, another one of those loose ends that was left when the district was created, similar to the tax issue, and I'm trying to help these cities understand that while 36.121 exempts you from the regulations of a groundwater district, it also exempts you from the protections. And so if you don't have a permit and you are exempt and you're thinking you're just humming right along and everything's great, one of these days a large producer could show up. I talked to the Marfa City Council recently, and I gave them an example of maybe like a water company that wants to sell Prada Marfa water, pump it out, set up shop near the municipal wells, bottle it, sell it, it'll go crazy, it'll blow up on social media, it'll be awesome. Well, if the city's wells start to go down and they don't have a permit, it makes it very difficult for a groundwater district to invoke its very limited powers under Chapter 36 to have any effect on that producer. That producer is going to come to us and ask for water, and we really don't have much of an ability to say no, and so it's imperative that the cities get a permit that they can take to the bank and that they can take to court. And so trying to convince them to do that is what we're really working hard on right now, because ultimately, we're not seeing the growth now, but I try to remind people, talk to people who lived in Dripping Springs 30 years ago. Talk to people who lived in Georgetown 30 years ago. They never thought they were going to see the kind of growth that they're seeing, and we could have that eventually in Presidio County. So it's just a matter of trying to convince our leaders now to maybe make a decision that doesn't seem to make sense today, but that's going to help people in the future, maybe after everybody in this room's dead. But it's going to eventually come, and so our role is to get ready, and so that's what we're working on right now.
Janet, let's turn to you. Since you said that all water flows through you in Jeff Davis County, talk a little bit about the relationships that you have with landowners and how you work with them to achieve your goals.
Well, I have a bunch out here in the audience, I think, and I hope they're saying she works well with us and respects our rights. A groundwater district can go on land without permission. That is one thing Jeff Davis has never done. If I can't get permission from the owner and talk to them, I will not set foot on their land, because that's private property. I've never had anybody turn me down. We measure wells, we go out and we can samples and stuff, and I just think respecting their private property rights is the most important thing to my district.
Joan, what about in Brewster County? You've got a lot of different types of uses, so I imagine it's difficult.
Well, we've just got a lot of stakeholders. Primarily, the use is municipal and agriculture, but livestock watering. But there's so many stakeholders with different ideas, different amounts of land they own. But respect for private property is top of the list, but it has to be balanced all the time with the needs of everybody needing a drink of water. So it's a continuing challenge to balance that in such a large geographical area, but that is our number one goal.
And I mean, all of y'all are walking that balance. How are you doing that in Reeves County, Greg?
In relationships with people and all.
Yeah, I mean, I think you had mentioned when we were talking about this panel discussion, the role that outreach plays with landowners, and I think that, to me, is one way that districts can achieve that balance, because you have to be communicating, I imagine, with the people you're regulating.
Yeah, like Janet said, we start off with private property rights and how we respect them, and how our original board, they wanted to emphasize that above everything in whatever we do. And again, we have some that, lots of absentee landowners. And with the oil business going on, those lands change hands regularly. And we still have parcels with wells all of them that we have yet to find who really owns it. And, but we get along, again, go back to them, tell them what we're not trying to do. We're not trying to take their waterway. We show them, what we can do to try to help protect things. And I did want to mention something that all water does go through the Adams family, because the city of Balmaray gets their drinking water from one well in Jeff Davis County. The city of Balmaray owns water rights, surface water rights in Jeff Davis County, and they gravity flow that and sell it to the city of Toyah. And town of Pecos City, they have wells in Reeves County, but they also get a lot of their drinking water from Ward County. So we have lots of water, a lot of water in Reeves County, but it's not very good drinking water.
So we are going to talk about one more issue and then leave a good bit of time for questions. So be thinking about questions that you might have. But I want to talk for a moment about science and the role that plays in what you do. We've yesterday and then this morning heard a lot about the hydrogeology of this region and the importance of monitoring groundwater levels to kind of understand then how to manage them. And so, Janet, you mentioned a little bit about, the relationship that you have with landowners, getting on property voluntarily to look at water levels and water quality. So can you share a little bit about the kind of science that you're working on?
We are lacking in a lot of science and a lot of data, but we do measure 36 wells every year, the same wells in February, so that we're getting an accurate static level on them. We've, I guess, have some back as far as 1950. Most currently, we've done since '96. We have a bunch, but in the 50s, I went back and did some research from the state and got measurements on these wells, so we know exactly what their level is every February, which we're fixing to do again. And also, this last year, my board voted for me to get equipment where I can test water for bacteria. This is free to all Jeff Davis County landowners, and so we test their wells. And we've found some that needed cleaning up, and that's just another thing we do for our landowners.
So you said you have 36 wells that
Observations.
you monitor.
Right. We have more that we check, not as regular, but we have 36 every February.
And you said that you need more data. So what does that look like? What is it that you need that you don't have?
Stuff I can't do. I need the scientific people to help me. You know, and we've had some studies done, but it's just a lot of unknowns in rural areas.
Trey, I know you've been working really hard in Presidio County to drill more monitoring wells and equip wells with monitoring equipment, looking creatively for funding since you don't have a lot of that. So talk a little bit about that effort,
Yeah, so
why
Jan-
you're doing it.
So Janet's right. I mean, it's hard. You know, we're out here on the frontier. There's not a lot of expertise, and there's certainly not a lot of money. My groundwater district has a budget of 52 grand a year, and so I've had to follow a lot, get real friendly with a lot of different organizations and shake them down for money, you know, and try to get them to fund things. And we've been working with a lot of people. I feel like it's kind of Academy Award sort of acceptance, and I'm going to forget somebody. So I may not name all the groups that we're working with, but we've been really, really fortunate to build partnerships and expand our monitoring network. We're also working to shake down the Texas Water Development Board as hard as they make it to get some money for a 3D hydrogeologic model of our aquifers, and also a managed aquifer recharge study to understand places where maybe we can make enhancements. I mean, if we're thinking about our aquifers as kind of like a savings account for the future, we'd really like to be able to just live off the interest and keep building up that principal. And so if we can figure out places where we know that's where the recharge is happening, how can we hold the runoff? How can we keep the water there long enough to infiltrate? How can we restore our watersheds and our creeks so that they're acting like the sponges that they were when the first Anglo settlers showed up out here? And so these are the kinds of things that, you know, maybe aren't traditionally what a groundwater district does, but because we are a public entity and we have access to state funding and federal funding, we're trying to get creative with how we can approach this, always hand in hand with landowners, and always with an understanding that we can't do any of this without them. So yeah, I mean that's kind of what we're working on, trying to get our science tight and trying to get our understanding of the sources of our water as clear as possible.
Yeah, it's been pretty impressive to see what you've been doing with limited resources, so congratulations. Joan, Dr. Urbanzik had mentioned earlier about Brewster County and just sort of a lack of data that y'all have, particularly more so than even other counties in the area. So what are your kind of plans and goals for the horizon to address that?
Thank goodness for Dr. Urbanzik to start with, that he's on our board, and he's very active on our board, and he brings some science, geology to the table every meeting, and we appreciate that. But at the end of the day, we're also been dependent on Sol Ross's studies and Texas Water Development Board studies for the aquifers, and that's we're late coming to the table with that. And so our goal is to expand our monitors, which there's probably not 10 wells being monitored in Brewster County.
I mean, look how big it is. So
Yeah,
that's,
and Texas Water Development Board had about 650 to 675 registered wells in their database, and that does go back into the 50s somewhat, but I estimate that's probably half of the wells that are really in the county. So registration of wells for usage side, and then finding the funding and expanding the science studies, the wrapping, all of the things we need to define the aquifers, and the usage coming out of them are all on our list of chores to be done. So yeah, it's a long-term goal. We'll just have to depend on the funding we have, plus the state, plus the Sol Ross studies that, since we're physically in their area.
Yeah, I think there's a real role that Sol Ross can play in sort of maybe working on some of that science with all of the groundwater districts in the region. Okay, so Greg, let's finally get to you. You mentioned San Solomon Springs and some of the interests that your board has in funding research there. Is that the main priority, or do you have other research objectives that y'all are working on?
Until now, that's been the main priority, but we're advancing our scope this year and into next year about, like everybody says, data, you need more data. And we're about 50 monitor wells. I just recently added 10 more, and we hope to have a couple of hundred within at least 2 years. And but the focus is shifting more. We're going to keep the San Solomon, all of that research, and increase that, but we're into produced water. And what's happening with that, potential contamination, the injection wells, you know, what with failing infrastructure, old wells, either water wells or oil wells, and we hear the things that are happening in neighboring counties and the unwanted lakes that are springing up and things. But we're working with oil companies to get more into research in that area and try to monitor more of the quality, especially on the eastern side and the northern side, closer to New Mexico.
Yeah, because I think we often tend to focus more on what groundwater districts do for water quantity, but y'all play an important role in protecting water quality as well. So that's interesting to hear. Okay, we're going to transition to questions. So I see one right here. Do we have the mics ready?
Is this on? Yeah. My name's Louis Land. I'm a hydrologist from New Mexico. One of the things, looking at this really interesting map you have projected up there, is the fact that nobody's commenting about this, is that the culverts, all of these groundwater districts are approximately defined by county boundaries. The Culberson County Groundwater District only covers the southwest part of Culberson County, and I just wondered if any of you could comment about that. Maybe the two that are bordering Culberson County, Janet and Greg, perhaps?
I'll just make one comment and then I'll let y'all answer, which is something that Chairman King mentioned, which is you kind of have to pass what you can pass, and maybe at that time, that was what the legislature could get through, is that western half, but maybe y'all have specifics.
That's exactly right. The landowners in the rest of the county did not want a groundwater district and fought it, so they went with the ones that would vote for it.
I believe they even revisited that a few years ago, and it failed a second time. And I don't know if you know who owns a lot of that land in that area. I don't even know if I want to say.
Next question. I thought I saw some hands over here. Oh,
One on here.
Okay.
Does that work? Hello, my name's Larry Sunderland. I'm from Terlingua Ranch, and if you look at the map that we saw in the previous presentation, all those wells that were drilled in South Brewster County, most of those are on Terlingua Ranch. I was really not aware of what water districts do, but protecting water I think is a great hook to get people to buy into presenting their wells for monitoring. And we are happy on Terlingua Ranch to help the district make that happen. So it won't cost you anything. I don't get paid for what I do, but water is so important to us down there. And I know it's just a big hole that people don't understand what's going on down there. They don't realize that we have no ability to control any property owners and what they do in our properties. So we're here to help, and if you just reach out to us, reach out to our John Sellers, who's our ranch manager, very good guy, and I'm on the board of directors, and you can reach out to either one of us, and anything we can do to help you get more wells, in your database, we want to do that. Okay?
Thank you, and yes, we will be in contact with you.
I'm Ruthie Russell, and just one of my questions, it's a big one and you all may not really want to answer it completely, but there's the pros and cons of why to have a water district or not to have a water district. You were just saying, and there are many areas in Texas, that's part of my question, that don't have water districts. And the landowners, for reasons I want to hear from you guys, the cons of why you would not have a water district. And it's one of the debates that a group of us have in Valverde County of how hard to fight for one or not to have one. Because obviously in Valverde County with the Devil's River, our priority is preserving those springs, and we don't want water companies coming in there. We don't want water exported. We don't want overuse of water that could damage those springs, which are our priority. But then we could possibly have a conflict with Del Rio and their uses. And so we're just kind of in this conundrum, how hard do we push for a water district or not? So I'd like to hear what you think the cons are. Obviously the pros are the monitoring's awesome, the protection is awesome, and that's the priority.
Could I say something first on that? We had my group, Reeves County, when they started, of course the oil industry had picked up, fracking started, and the original organizers talked all around the county to different people and decided that they would want to have local control on at least as much as possible, to control what water is used in the oil business for drilling, fracking, and all that. And plus, there was a rumor going around, I don't know if it's ever going to come about, but these areas that do not have groundwater districts, the rumor was that in the future, the state is going to start controlling that area, and they'd rather have local control in the state zone. And that's what my group reasoning.
That would be a terrible fear if the local lost control.
Anyone else want to answer that? Okay, I might just add that, I think, Ruthie, what the question that you're asking yourself is it better to have no district or to have a district that can't do anything, right? That is essentially powerless. And I think it just comes down to making sure, and when you're advocating for a groundwater district to be created, that that district has the powers and the funding to be able to actually manage groundwater to the long term. So,
And the signs.
yeah, and the science, obviously. Okay, we have a few more minutes. I see
Hi,
hands
Jeff
waving.
Bennett with the Rio Grande Joint Venture. I also serve on the Regional Water Supply and Flood Planning Group. We heard from Trey that his annual budget is $52,000.
Can you talk louder?
We heard from Trey that his annual budget is $52,000. Obviously, that impacts the ability to make science-based decisions and protect your rules and things. So I wonder what the other districts, what their annual budgets are, and what their dream budget might be for science and monitoring.
So you want to know how much my budget is?
Yep.
We started out at 0.8 of 1 penny 7 years ago, and we're down to 0.3 of 1 penny, and it's going to bring in right at $1 million. Reeves County, I think this year, at the end of this year, is going to have a valuation of $40 billion. And it was, I think, 15 years ago, it was 700,000.
And that's all from the oil and gas, yeah.
And I'm sorry, but it happened.
You're gonna get,
If I could give them money, I'd do it, but we'll see.
I've got ideas for how you can, science.
We get to start maybe the state Robin Hood plan.
Our budget is $85,000, most of which comes from the county. We are in the process of reviewing our rates for production permits, that sort of thing. But that is our number, but most of that is going to get spent on trying to get wells registered and doing some smaller studies. There's no way we can study 5 aquifers, but between monitoring wells and smaller studies, that's how that money will get spent.
So you have fee-based, and then the county's actually supplementing your budget.
Yes.
Which for a while was the case of Presidio.
Yeah, that's really the only thing, that's the only way it can work, because the fees are never that high. They're never that much money.
Janet, do you want to answer that question?
Well, my budget's 87, and my dream budget is Grant's budget. Then I can do whatever I want to get data.
But to put it in perspective, of course, there's only 2 employees in the district, and we run ourselves ragged, but that a lot of the research that we do, we started breaking down. The board members said, we can't put that much money in research, and we look at a weekly budget for some of the groups coming out there to just do 20 monitored or whatever different samples in a week, maybe $25,000 to $40,000 that they'll spend in a week, and they do that off and on throughout the year. So we spend a lot of money to keep this research going, and we're going to increase it too.
And if I could just comment real quick, I think that question and everyone's responses highlights this kind of feast or famine issue that we have, because the local control is great, but if you don't have local funding sources, you don't have a lot of money to do what you need to do. And the state even has mandates. We have to do all these reports, we have to come up with all these numbers. And so I think some of the efforts of Environmental Defense Fund to get the state to pony up more money, I mean, if they're going to mandate these things, then they need to understand the limitations of relatively low-income places like many of our counties, and they need to help us. So, because ultimately the state will benefit from that, everybody will benefit from that, if understanding that we're trying as hard as we can, we're getting as creative as we can, but it's still not enough.
Other questions? One right here. Oh, okay, I can't, it's hard to see who's standing there.
Hey, my name is Cody Bjornson. I'm with the Texas Water Development Board. Little shameless plug on my part. I lead the water level program on behalf of the Water Development Board, and I wanted to comment on data collection in the region and just sort of point out that as of 4 years ago, to my knowledge, we were the only ones doing continuous water level monitoring in y'all's districts. And I'm really happy to see that, I think in 2020, Greg took over our roughly 40 monitoring wells. And then now Trey has recently gotten a grant to install real-time monitoring equipment in a network of wells in Presidio County, of which a handful are have been monitored by the TWDB. So I just wanted to say that, generally comment that this is a good thing, and I would hope to see more of this in the future, particularly, with Brewster, GCD, Jeff Davis, and Culberson. Because as it is, the state, we already have limited resources for monitoring, and basically everyone except for me is headquarters is in Austin. It takes a lot of resources to come out here, and just thinking of it from the perspective of this is y'all's backyard, you have better contact with the locals and boots on the ground more or less. So I would just hope to see more of that in the future. Whether that's securing money through grants or, just becoming more resourceful in a variety of ways, of which maybe I don't know right now, but that would allow the TWDB to focus monitoring efforts in areas that don't have GCDs. So that's just my general comment, wondering if you'll have any comments to that.
I'd like, Water Development Board does a good job in looking through the records that we have in our county. There were hundreds of monitor wells there at one time. And it dwindled down to about 40 or so that we took over. And I owe you some data, I know. I would impress upon the people here, you know, if you got a windmill, you got an old well, or a new one, or whatever, you know, let the GCD, if you'd like to, let the GCD in your area come and, you know, monitor it, or take a static level once a year just to see what in your area. They're not going to say, okay, you can't pump anymore. They're not going to do that. They just want to see what the general area was, and the more wells that they can do that to, they can keep up with what's happening. So it'll help out a lot if you offer one or two, or if you got so many wells, offer a dozen or two.
Yeah, thanks, Cody, for your question. And I think, you know, maybe with Greg's district as an exception, most districts across Texas are underfunded, and there is not a lot of funding for groundwater monitoring data. And so that's something that Environmental Defense Fund, along with some other partners, have been working on to try to create a new program that the state, that the Water Development Board would administer, that would provide grant funding to groundwater districts to be able to apply to and then can collect that data locally. Because some of the funding that you've had to access, Trey, has been in federal dollars, right? So
That's a total headache.
Yeah.
You know, it would be really nice if we could just have local money, you know, but you gotta jump through all those hoops, and it's just, yeah, it's rare to find people that are willing to do that, so.
You have still a question, Ellen? Okay. Is there a mic?
Okay, I got a lot of them. So try to answer.
Okay.
Okay, so my name is Dean Willis. I'm also a property owner on Terlingua Ranch down south, that big cluster of water wells. My neighbor Larry volunteered to make a lot of those accessible to the county, but I'd like to offer some contrarian arguments. When we talked about the roles of the districts, I think every one of you mentioned rulemaking as a critical component of your activity. Well, we've got you guys rulemaking, we've got the Texas Water Development Board, we've got the EPA, we've got TCEQ. If I understand the operations of Terlingua Ranch, just attempting to comply with TCEQ's requirements are basically, if we'd done it the way they wanted to start with, would cost more than the operating budget of the entire Terlingua Ranch Property Owners Association, right? We're actually being strangled in rules. And I love Joan, she's my best friend, but I'm not telling you where my water wells are, okay? They're secret, as long as I can keep them that way. I'll be dead in 20 years and somebody else will sort it out. But let's really think about this from the complexity level of people trying to comply with all of these layers of rules. Everybody wants more rules, everybody wants more data, everyone wants more centralized planning. How well has centralized planning worked for, say, China? Is it going to work any better for us? Maybe there's a way to back off on all of this layers and layers and layers of rules. Please find a way.
You want to respond to that?
If you will go to the state and tell them we don't need these rules, I'd love it. But we don't have a choice. And that's part of the problem. We have rules, we have management plans, we have all kinds of reports, so we spend more time doing paperwork than we do out in the field. But we don't have that choice to do or not do, we have to.
What are those rules supposed to accomplish though? I mean, I understand that they can be too much sometimes to try to implement, but what is the point of the rules? I mean, isn't it to, I'm looking at you, Trey,
Okay,
but I mean, because you kind of addressed this earlier. in
Yeah,
your
I bring up rulemaking because that's in statute. You know, we have to do that, and we have to permit. And so, you know, I don't want more rules either. And I hear you when you say we're strangling in rules and we don't have the money and we don't have the operating budget even to provide water to our users, but then we're supposed to come up with all this other junk. I mean, do you see my choir robe? I mean, you are preaching to the choir here, sir, but the law says that we have to do these things. So, you know, one rule that we have is sort of spacing requirements. So one neighbor is hopefully not sucking another neighbor's well dry. You know, sort of common sense things. I mean, I try to focus on sort of the common sense rules that benefit everybody. Now, I understand TCEQ can be, you know, that's a different animal, but we're mostly dealing with Texas Water Development Board, I mean, with Texas legislation and the Texas Water Code. And we have to. I mean, that's what we're there to do. And the state would come after us if we weren't doing those things. Carlos, do you have a comment?
Yeah, but I think this could be our last
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Can somebody get that man a microphone?
No, I probably don't need one comment about rules. Rules is also a function of being able to protect property rights and water. And we need to keep that in mind. It's a key consideration.
It's hard to hear you, Carlos. Okay.
Rules are a key consideration in also protecting and preserving a property right to water. That is a way that they also should be looked at. And it's also important to note that during the last legislative session, among the things that the legislature changed was the right of property owners who feel that local rules are not protective enough of their property rights to groundwater can petition a groundwater conservation district to modify the rules. And so I think we need to put it all in perspective.
And you make a good point, Carlos, because if we don't have rules, how do you have fairness? If everybody doesn't have rules that they all have to abide by, how do you have a fair playing field?
Just the other comment, where you're talking about a municipal water district, if you have no rules, then your quality of your water being consumed are going to be exposed. So TCEQ, that's their job, and we comply with those where it applies to water districts, but the municipal water needs are a little different than the groundwater conservation district.
Well, thank you all very much.
Let's do one more.
Would you want to do one more? Okay.
Ellen Ray.
Oh,
Sure, super quick. I'm so impressed with how collegial you are with one another, and I'm curious if there are opportunities for you all to partner together that provide economies of scale, whether it be on gathering the data or back office work or applying for grants together. Is that anything, or do you have your hands full with what you have on your plate already?
Craig already said Robin Hood. I'm just kidding.
We do have an organization required by the state that, well, Greg's not in ours, but it's, we have 7 groundwater district, 5 in our GMA. And we meet and discuss and try to get our rules the same, and we meet regularly. So we are doing that.
Well, in that effort, we do some of the reporting requirements. We use the same consultants to save on dollars spent in that method.
Yeah, because y'all worked with Presidio County,
Yeah,
right?
and we also did, where you talk about kind of grant writing, we got a grant from the Bureau of Reclamation, a Water Smart grant, and we were able to get half off on some data management software that pretty much all the districts in the area use or will use. And so we've got sort of a data sharing platform that we're trying to perfect. But Janet's right, it's mostly the Groundwater Management Area 4 meetings and also the TAG Groundwater Summit, where we get to meet every year in San Antonio, that really builds that collegial spirit. Because I mean, we're all in this together.
The aquifers don't have the same boundaries that y'all do. So, thank you for all the good questions. We're at time, and it's time for lunch, I believe. So thank you, panelists, and we'll be around.